everyone who is here to the first in our lecture series that is called An Ideal Party with Loaves, Fishes and Accessories. AUC generally has a lecture series for Egyptology throughout the year, and this is the first time that we've actually been brave enough to deal with a webinar. And thanks very much to my colleagues, Daniele, Anne-Claire and Meredith, and particularly to Daniele for being brave enough to take on the magic of the computer and the webinar, because as many people know, I can barely use a blender. So it's a great thing that we can move forward, but it's a wonderful way for us to be able to connect with people beyond our usual Cairo audience. And I hope that maybe in the future we will take advantage of this again and again, because it is a wonderful way to connect with the broader Egyptological world. As you know, we are starting gently, so we are starting with 3 lectures in this series. Today's lecture will be by Dr. Anne-Claire Salmas, who will be speaking about Bernard Bruyère and the Chamber of Secrets, all about archaeological pranks. And if those of you who like fish, this is up your alley. The next lecture in the series will be on April 12th, which is Monday, which will be tracing the Archangel Michael's bun, devotion to antiquity. So you can see that we are ranging far and wide in terms of time periods. And on April 26th, we will have Life at a Middle Kingdom Amethyst Mine, Archaeology of Site 5, Wadi el-Hudi by Meredith Brand. So I very much hope that people who are here today continue to join us for all 3 of these lectures. And now I would like to turn it over to Daniele Salvoldi to introduce today's speaker, Anne-Claire. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Ikram. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce Anne-Claire Salmas. A short bio here. After receiving her PhD from the Sorbonne University, Dr. Anne-Claire Salmas worked in several international institutions, including l'École du Louvre, Brown University, and the Griffith Institute at the University of Oxford, before being appointed assistant professor of Egyptology at the American University in Cairo. Her doctoral dissertation was devoted to understanding temporal rhythms and daily life experiences associated with temporal phenomena in ancient Egypt. And since time and space naturally frame everyday life, this initial research has led her to investigate spatial practices by exploring how space was perceived, experienced, and reconstructed on a daily basis by individuals and communities in ancient Egypt. She's also entrusted by the IFAO to study and publish the Theban tomb 2b at Deir el-Medina, a site that moreover constitutes a pertinent case study on spatial negotiation. So again, it's my pleasure here to leave the floor to Anne-Claire Salmas, Bernard Bruyère, and the Chambers of Secrets, Archaeological Pranks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniele. I don't know if I should leave my camera on or off. I hope I won't be kicked out from the Zoom meeting. It happens sometimes, especially when you are in class, but let's hope for the best. So I will shut my camera down after having thanked you for the introductions. Thanks, Dr. Ikram as well. And I'm very pleased to have this whole international audience. And I recognize many names in the audience. So it's very nice to see your names, and to those I know, a special hello. So I'm going to shut down my camera, then share my screen, and you will tell me if you see the screen.
We do, yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. So I will start. So this talk will be a little off the Egyptological beaten track, because it will only superficially discuss the pharaonic era. So the decor is that of Deir el-Medina on the west bank of the modern city of Luxor in Ipuy, Egypt. And it is on this site that the member of the community of workmen who dug and decorated the royal tombs of the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens lived and were buried during a large part of the New Kingdom, that is around 1550 and 1070 BC. So this conference will deal with the late occupation of the site by 20th century archaeologists, in particular by Bernard Bruyère, and it will deal more specifically with the artistic and humoristic traces that the later left in the French Institute Dighouse, perched on the Western Cemetery. So Bernard Bruyère is the main excavator of Deir el-Medina. He worked there for almost 30 years between 1922 and 1951, making knowledge on the site and the community of workmen accessible to scholars and the general audience. Born into a military family, Bruyère turned to art and Egyptology only after he failed the competitive entrance exam of Saint-Cyr, a prestigious military school in France. Of his family legacy and initial education, Bruyère always retained a military deportment and a quasi-soldiery attitude, as recalled by Georges Posner. And I quote in translation, wearing a pea jacket and riding breeches, high boots on his feet and a peace helmet on his head, Bruyère was a military-looking man, and his hair went together with his way of leading both the excavation and the house on which the French flag flew. Hence, a very serious man, who nevertheless sometimes allowed himself to relaxing moments, as evidenced by these archive photographs, and who allowed himself to some jokes and pranks, as we will see during this talk. So at Deir el-Medina, in the privacy of the dig house, he had restored and extended. It was originally a small cabin built by Ernesto Schiaparelli. Bruyère had openly expressed his artistic talents, his fantasy, and his sense of humor in the form of two paintings that are relatively unknown outside the circle of French Egyptologists and outside what we used to call Deir el-Medina's people, modern Deir el-Medina's people. So the first of Bruyère's work is to be found in one of the two bedrooms located on the lower level of the dig house. This room, added for the accommodation of the young scholar Jacques Jeanclair, was built in 1928, which gives a terminus antequem for the painting. In the painting, located on the west wall of the room, Bruyère reproduced with consummate skill one of the secondary characters from the decoration of the tomb of Ipuy, the Theban tomb 217. The tableau, rather small in size, is based on a scene of worship and offerings, which unfolds on two walls of Ipuy's chapel. It depicts Ipuy, accompanied by his wife and daughter, facing Osiris himself, protected by Hathor, goddess of the West. The young girl, that is Ipuy's daughter, whose image served as a model for Bruyère, is shown standing while holding a papyrus stem in one hand and a duck in the other. She wears the side lock, typical of childhood, embellished by a headband, a lotus flower, and a head cone. And like her parents, she is richly dressed. Bruyère only copied part of this figure on a slightly different scale, though. He used a palette of delicate and pale colors, as if he took his inspiration from the black and white photograph reproduced in the publication, rather than from the original. That being said, this painting already gives you a good idea of Bruyère's artistic talents, many examples of which can also be found in his notebooks. And one of the most beautiful examples, as it seems to me, is the drawing he made of Senefer's intact burial uncovered in pit 1159 at Deir el-Medina. So note that this is here a freehand ink drawing for which there does not seem to be any preliminary sketch. Even more important and probably more personal is the parody that Bruyère made of one of the scenes from the burial chamber of the Theban tomb number 2, 2B, which will be abbreviated during this talk in TT2, TT2B. So the original scene is located in the burial chamber of TT2, TT2B, a monument that I am interested to publish by the IFAO, the French Institute of Archaeology in Cairo. This tomb, or rather this funerary complex, dates to the 19th dynasty. Traditionally attributed to Rabberenet, it was most likely built on the initiative of two brothers, Ronsu and Rabberenet, both sons of Senedjen. Painted in the so-called monochrome style, the tableau represents the god Anubis embalming a fish depicted on a funerary bed. It's one of the most famous tableaux of the tomb, if not the most famous tableau, and it's moreover unique in the whole ancient Egyptian art. I am taking the opportunity of this talk to acknowledge the great work of Alexandra Winkels, who is responsible for the conservation of the burial chamber and worked tirelessly to preserve this unique scene. So in this scene, the fish identified, and I quote in translation, as the Abju fish of genuine lapis lazuli, is an hypostasis of Osiris who regains the integrity of his body thanks to Anubis' care. The parody created by Bruyère is located on the back wall of his former bedroom in Deir el-Medina's Diga house. And in some sketches of the house, such as this one made by Jacques Jean-Clair, the parody, or rather the main component of the parody, the fish, serves to locate the place. Larger than the original, the parody is often called the bouillabaisse recipe, and we will see why. During this talk, I will discuss the parody in a scientific way, as if it were an ancient painting, a genuine ancient painting. And this is my nod to Bruyère. So as regards the main information that we usually give for an artwork. So this artifact comes from Deir el-Medina, more precisely from Bruyère's room in the French dig house. It's located on the northern half of the west wall. It's a painting on the wall plaster imitating the so-called monochrome style by using a restricted color palette. The background is of a whitish color, while scenes and text are painted in black, yellow, and to a lesser extent, red. Almost square, the painting measures 1.27 meters by 1.30 meters. It is still kept in situ in the French dig house, and it's in a good condition, although some conservation measures have been conducted in 2004-2005. Finally, the painting likely dates to the 1930s. As previously mentioned, Bruyère's parody draws its inspiration from the fish scene in TT2, TT2B, the technical characteristics on the one hand, and the iconographic features on the other. However, many components of the original tableau are diverted in the parody. In the latter, as you can see here, the textual part is much more developed, even though texts are punctuated with grammatical mistakes. One may wonder whether the scribe or the painter was working with a defective copy. Now let us study the scene on the Ipuy register. Delineated here below by a line depicting the earth, and above by the hieroglyphic sign for sky, the main part of the tableau is set under an ephemeral shelter, which is most likely the mummification tent. It shows the jackal-headed god Anubis, accompanied by the goddesses Isis and Nephthys, taking care of a fish lying on a funerary bed. 3 small scenes complete the representation. At the top of the funerary edicule, 2 wadjet eyes are depicted symmetrically around a small vase. Examples of such an iconographic feature are well known in the pharaonic repertoire. What seems to be less known, though, are the tears flowing from the eyes. One can think at first of a humorous diversion if it were not for the lines of dot, some fluids maybe, coming out the wadjet eyes in the original scene. That being said, the fact that the wadjet eyes of the parody are encircled is surprising. In fact, their design evokes a lorgnette, that is a pair of glasses held in front of a person's eyes by a long handle at one side. To the right, a mummy-wrapped cat is seated. It holds between its paws the hieroglyphic sign for west, which transforms into a drum and which the cat is about to play. The text associated reads, "Make the bouillabaisse," the word bouillabaisse being written phonetically. It seems that the musician cat proclaims the main idea behind the primary scene of the parody, which is cooking. A fake Coptic graffito has been inscribed below the image, and we will discuss it later during the talk. To the left is depicted a human mummy-wrapped figure wearing a feather on the head, and it's the male version of the goddess Maat. So while fishing, this he Maat quietly smokes a pipe, the design of which diverges from that of a false beard. At the end of the fishing line, there is no fish though, but a tin can of salt, which is moreover used to represent Isis's crown and write her name. 2 texts are associated with this small scene. The first one gives the words of the fisherman and reads, "Saying the word by the fisherman, how perfect this catch of salt is." The second caption, which reads, "Without salt, the fish is not good," underlines the importance of seasoning in the recipe. The main section of the Ipuy register depicts the god Anubis, who is about to cut open a huge fish lying on a funerary bed. Under the bed, 3 jars have been placed. 2 of them, which have inwards curving bodies, are sealed with a stopper. They are labeled and contain pickles and mustard, respectively. The 3rd jar, with a rounded body and a stopper, is not labeled. However, its content is represented transparently, and one wonders whether it does also contain pickles. The shape of the funerary bed resembles that of some pharaonic models. The legs take the form of lion paws, while the head and foot are adorned with the head and tails of the same animal. At the foot and head of the funerary bed, one finds 4 mummified figurines. These are the 4 sons of Horus, protectors of the viscera. On one hand, Kebesenouf, traditionally with a falcon head, but rather with a parrot head in the parody, is paired with Happy, which seems to have a dog head instead of the traditional baboon head. On the other hand, the canine-headed Douamoutef is paired with Amset, with a human face. Amset's beard, as you can see, is so long that it literally enters into the mouth of Douamoutef, whose body leans dangerously backwards. As a matter of fact, Douamoutef tries to recover his balance by beating into his companion's beard. So on the funerary bed lies a giant fish, the drawing of which is detailed, and 2 details are of importance: the animal's relatively large mouth and its spiny dorsal fin. These features help to identify the fish with a red scorpion fish, which is precisely one of the main ingredients of the bouillabaisse. The fish, as you can see, is mummified, and the main external bandages are inscribed with the words toujours à mieux. This is a reference to the slogan of an important fish cannery, à mieux frère, well known in Bruyère's time for its products as well as for its advertising posters, such as the one presented here. This slogan is important because it did not appear until 1930, which gives a terminus postquem for the creation of the parody. So immobilized on the funerary bed, the fish is about to be cut open, a prospect that seems frightening, judging from the fish's scared eye turned toward the knife. The cook is the god Anubis, whose depiction follows his traditional iconography in the ancient Egyptian art. Two texts are apparently associated with the main scene. The first one is inscribed on the right hand of the scene and reads, saying the words by the one who is open, I am the fish of the 4th month, implied of the year. The second caption, written above the fish's head, is longer and reads, saying the word by the perfect fish. Will I turn into a sardine in oil or a lobster? And the word is written by a unique hieroglyphic sign. So will I turn into a sardine in oil or a lobster à l'américaine? The mention of the sardine in oil refers to the cannery à mieux frère, of which canned sardines were one of the star products, while the lobster à l'américaine refers to a specific recipe of French cuisine. Imagery and texts therefore play around the idea of several recipes involving fish or shellfish, the bouillabaisse, the sardine in oil, the lobster à l'américaine. Now let's go back to the scene. Totally absorbed by his task, Anubis is, however, disturbed by the facetious Isis, who has attached a saucepan to the god's tail. The text behind Isis reads literally, Isis has made to Anubis a fish of the first day of the 4th month of the year, which means that she has pulled an April's Fool on him. In France, the traditional prank, which is called Poisson d'Avril, fish of April, is to tie a fish made of paper behind someone's back. It always comes back to a fish, one way or another. Anubis looks angry and turns to the goddess, telling her, and I quote in translation, saying the words by Anubis. Why are you tying a saucepan? And the word, as you can see, is written by a unique ideogram. So why are you tying a saucepan to my tail? But as you can see, Isis does not really care about Anubis's anger. On the contrary, she bursts out of laughing. The traditional ancient Egyptian gesture of lamentation is diverted in the parody and used to conceal the goddess' hilarity. Meanwhile, Nephthys does not lament either. She is too busy teasing the lion whose head formed the head of the funerary bed. The main caption is inscribed horizontally just below the whole scene and reads, I am the perfect fish of the 4th month of the year, the first day. In other words, he is the Poisson d'Avril, or in English, the April's Fool. The text clearly indicates that the whole ensemble is actually a farce. Note the use of a unique hieroglyphic sign to write the word fish. Here again, it has all the characteristics of the red scorpion fish and therefore echoes the image of the fish lying on the funerary bed. Two texts are inscribed in the lower register, one long text in columns and a short one consisting of one line. We will start by discussing the longer text. So the first text displayed in columns is a negative confession or a declaration of innocence. Included in the chapter 125 of the Book of the Dead, the negative confession comprises tabulated denial of wrongdoing, uttered in front of a divine court presided by Osiris and attended by 42 assessors one for each nome. Traditionally, this text aims to clear the deceased of all charges against them, or in a Christian transposition of all their sins, in order to enter the afterlife in a state of purity of sorts. As I am sure you realize, the negative confession is completely diverted in the parody, even if the layout is traditional. At first sight, the statement taken separately or together can be confusing. However, they almost all offer opportunities for puns around words designating an element of the aquatic environment. We will discuss these statements one by one, but before we begin, I want to point out that there are many terms that are unique in the Egyptian vocabulary and are therefore written phonetically. The first confession reads, "I will say nothing, for I never tell anything true." This first statement functions as an introduction of sorts. Everything that will be said is false, or at least should not be taken seriously. We have been warned. The second confession reads, "I did not say I am the ictus of those from Najarena," Najarena being Nazareth. We are learning here that the people of Nazareth worship a fish, ictus in ancient Greek, which they consider to be their king, and note the use of the cartouche. This, of course, refers to the secret symbol adopted by the early Christian, who moreover played on the first letters of the Greek word ictus to create the anagram Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. In Greek, Jesus Christos, Theos, Ios, Soter. The third confession reads, "I did not swallow Jonah, the Jew." This statement refers directly to the Old Testament and the story of Jonah. After having disobeyed God, Jonah fled by sea, but the boat in which he had taken refuge was caught in a storm. Jonah was then thrown overboard and swallowed by a sea animal in whose belly he remained for 3 days and 3 nights before being spit out. The link between Jonah and the king god of the people of Nazareth, in other words, the Christ, is well established. In Matthew 12:40, we read, "For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Furthermore, Jonah, the Christ, and Osiris, quoted in the next statement, share common traits, since all three came back to life, although on different terms. The fourth confession reads, "I did not have a taste of Osiris, the great god, the one who does not have a phallus." Reference herein is made to a version of the myth of Osiris, which states that the god's phallus was eaten by an oxyrhynchus or a medjed fish. Despite being unable to recover these parts of the god's body, Isis still managed to conceive an heir, Horus, with her companion. The fifth confession reads, "I did not block the harbor, literally the bank, of Marseille." The French city Marseille is designated by its antique name, Massilia, written phonetically. This statement actually echoes a Provençal expression that says the sardine that shocked the port of Marseille. Well known since the 17th century, the expression has been the topic of numerous illustrations on postcards, for example. Although it is representative of the taste for exaggeration from people of Marseille, it nevertheless reflects an actual event during which the harbor of Marseille was blocked, not by a sardine with a D, but by a vessel named Sartine with a T. The story begins in 1779 when the sardine came back from India carrying French soldiers. While entering the Mediterranean Sea by the Strait of Gibraltar, the sardine was mistakenly targeted by the British Navy. Despite having lost her captain and several crew members, the sardine resumed her journey. But in May 1780, in front of Marseille, the sardine ran aground due to faulty navigation, temporarily preventing entry into the harbor of Marseille. The sixth confession reads, "I did not act as a tort," and in the text, the word is the French word morue. So I did not act as a tort on the street of the city. For non-native French speaker, this statement is not the easiest to understand. The French word morue, written phonetically, literally means codfish, and it's indicated here by the first determinative of the word. But this word also has another meaning in slang, in which it is used to describe a tort or a prostitute, as indicated by this second explicit determinative. As I previously mentioned, the different sentences put together do not form a coherent text, but each sentence is the pretext for a joke around an element of the aquatic environment. And this is verified in the following statement. The seventh confession reads, "I did not take the bread from a woman's mouth, as does the maquereau." Once again, the statement plays on the double meaning of the French word maquereau, which literally means mackerel, as evidenced by the first determinative, that of a fish. But this word also means pimp in French slang. Sorry for my French. Pardon my French. And this word is therefore characterized by a second determinative, very explicit, a man, hands in his pocket, waiting for his share of the pie. The eighth confession reads, "I did not turn into a socialist redfish." In French, the redfish corresponds to the English golden fish, and the color of the fish is indicated in the hieroglyphic sign. Of course, no fish, whether red or not, belongs to the Socialist political party. The pun is twofold here. It revolves around an element of the aquatic environment, a fish, a redfish, a goldfish, and around the red color, which is the color of choice for left parties, socialist or communist. The determinative used for the word socialist resembles that of the enemy in the hieroglyphic script, and one wonders whether this is intentional, unless the scribe or the painter intended to represent a man waving a red flag. That being said, it's possible that the socialist redfish refers to an actual historical figure, Ernest Philippe Poisson, and Poisson means fish in French. So close to Jean Jaurès, leader of the French Socialist Party, Poisson was a direct witness of Jaurès's assassination. The ninth confession, partially preserved, reads, "I did not cut a man's hair, as does the merlan." The French word merlan means literally whiting, a fish, but also designates in colloquial language a hairdresser or a wig maker. And this double meaning is indicated by the two partially preserved determinative for the word merlan, a fish here, and below a man holding a pair of scissors. And this tool also serves as a unique determinative for the Egyptian verb shad, cut. The association between the merlan and the hairdresser or wig maker stems from an old practice when the wig maker powdered the hair and wigs of his clients and ended up covered in white like a whiting, the fish, flawed before being cooked. Another recipe is mentioned here. A last line of text closes the ensemble and gives the name of the painter or of the scribe. It reads, made by the servant in the place of truth, the scribe of lines with competent fingers, Bruyère in syllabic writing, justified. Several expressions used in the signature are typically Egyptian. Servant in the place of truth is the traditional title of el-Medina's workman. Scribe of line is the designation of a particular category of workmen, the draftsmen, who, within the framework of el-Medina's community, were in charge of drawing and painting the royal tomb. The expression with competent fingers is commonly used to describe the qualities of a scribe. It emphasizes the fact that the scribe knows how to use his finger and ultimately knows how to properly write. In the context of the parody, the quality is fairly usurped, given the amount of grammatical and syntactic mistakes. Finally, the mention justify, literally true of voice, indicates that an individual is or will be in a projection into the future, judged morally righteous after the weighting of his or her heart. That being said, the main information resides in the name of the scribe or the painter, Bruyère. The archaeologist claims authorship of this work and indirectly proved that he was not devoid of humor despite his usual stiff attitude. One last element is missing in this commentary of the parody: the graffito inscribed in Coptic near the figure of the musician cat. Due to the mistakes it contains, it was probably written by Bruyère himself and not by a specialist of the Coptic language. The graffito was added sometime after the creation of the parody. A postcard now in the possession of Dr. Marlene de Meyer shows the parody without the presence of the Coptic graffito. Unfortunately, this document is undated. That being said, the graffito reads, I am Pavnutius. I swear that this fish is not the fish of the Christian, but it's an idol of the pagans. So who is Pavnutius? Two historical figures are possible candidates. Paphnutius the ascetic or the hermit, a 4th century anchorite and disciple of Saint Macarius, or Paphnutius of Thebes or the confessor, disciple of Saint Anthony and bishop of the Theban region at the beginning of the 4th century. However, I wonder whether the choice of this proper name is not to be thought elsewhere, for it literally means he who belongs to God. By using this name, the author of the graffito would proclaim his faith indirectly, insisting that he is a follower of the true God and not the follower of the pagan belief depicted in the above scene. The rest of the graffito seems clear on this point by opposing two types of fish. The embalmed fish, described by the Coptic term for fish and evoking Osiris and more broadly the ancient Egyptian funerary beliefs, and the fish used as a symbol by the early Christians and described in the graffito by the Greek word ichthus, transposed in Coptic, which is the kingfish of the people of Nazareth and ultimately the Christ. The circle comes back around. So even though the talk was not focused on ancient Egypt per se, I hope that you have enjoyed it and discovered another facet of Bruyère's character. If the archaeologist made knowledge on the site of el-Medina and the community of workmen accessible, he too wanted to leave his own mark there at the very place where he carried out his life's work. Other scholars also left traces at el-Medina, such as Yaroslav Cherny. During one of his stays at el-Medina, the Czech Egyptologist created a false stela or a false ostracon, which I will soon publish in James Allen's Festschrift. Textual in nature, the composition is a formula for drinking coffee and evokes the foreman Bruyère, the vizier Bruye, and the priest Drioton. Unfortunately, nothing is known of the fate of these artifacts, and it seems that only remains a black and white photograph in the Griffith Institute archive. Several archive documents also attest of the humor of the small community of scholars gathered around Bruyère, such as this postcard sent to Jacques Jeanclair by a party of prankers while on a visit at Saqqara. In addition to the text written in hieroglyphic script, the prankers signed their name using hieroglyphs. Vendier here, the lady of the house ditto, that is Madame Vendier, Robichon, qualified as the overseers of works, and Posner. Finally, Cherney, signed in hieratic. More recently, a she scribe perpetuated Bruyère's tradition in the dig house and left a visitor's graffito in one room. It reads, "This is a visit made by the she scribe Chloe to see this beautiful place and entertain herself there." As a conclusion, I would like to add a few words in the form of a wish of sorts for all funnier spent at Deir el-Medina and for many more to come, inshallah. I thank you all.
Well, thank you very much, Anne-Claire, for this very, very funny and witty presentation. And indeed, this is really relatively unknown outside of the circle of the French people and the visitors of the house. So it was actually very, very interesting. So I invite members of the audience to raise their hands or use the question and answer function for questions. Yeah, we have something written. And Austin, absolutely amazing talk. So she's asking, you want to read it yourself, Anne-Claire?
Yeah, I saw that. Okay. So hi, Han. She's the physical anthropologist of the mission of Deir el-Medina, for those who do not know Anne, and she's the one who discovered the tattooed mummy that we spoke about a lot, and we still speak about a lot. Unfortunately, there is no reference in Bruyère's diary to these parody. I believe that there were, but I browsed all of them and nothing is there, which is quite